You're standing in the shower. Water's running. You're not thinking about anything in particular. And then it happens. 3 seconds of a chorus you haven't heard on purpose in maybe a decade. Not a song you love. Not a song you've streamed, saved, or searched for. Just there. Looping. On a track with no play button and no skip. Your brain just hijacked itself with a song you don't even like. This is a video about why songs get stuck in your head, what's actually happening in there, why some songs do it constantly and others never do it at all, and why sheer willpower does almost nothing to make it stop. By the end of this, you'll understand why your brain treats a jingle from a car commercial with the exact same urgency as an unfinished sentence, and why that urgency is the entire trick the whole thing runs. On. Researchers call it an earworm, a direct translation of the German word ohrwurm, which entered English usage in the late 20th century once psychologists started taking the phenomenon seriously enough to study it properly. In 2003, marketing professor James Calaris at the University of Cincinnati ran one of the first formal surveys specifically on the experience, and found that roughly 98% of people report having earworms at some point in their lives. Later replications in Finland and the UK landed in a similar range, which is unusually consistent for psychology research. Almost nobody is immune. Not musicians, not people who claim they don't really listen to music, not you. But here's where it gets interesting, because if 98% of people get them, the real mystery isn't who gets earworms. It's why some songs qualify and the overwhelming majority of songs you hear every single day never do. A 2016 study out of Durham University, led by musicologist Kelly Jakubowski, analyzed the shared traits of the songs people most commonly reported as earworms, using survey data from thousands of participants. The pattern wasn't genre, and it wasn't lyrical content. It was structure. Sticky songs tend to move at a fast tempo, carry a simple and highly singable melody, and, this is the part that matters most, contain an unusual interval or repeated pitch pattern that makes the melody just slightly unpredictable, relative to typical pop music, simple enough for your brain to replicate effortlessly. Strange enough that it can't fully predict what comes next. That combination isn't an accident of pop songwriting. It's closer to a formula, whether songwriters consciously intend it or not, which is part of why certain jingles, written specifically to be remembered, are almost engineered earworms from the moment they're composed. But here's where it gets interesting, because unpredictable isn't just a musical quality your ears register in passing. It's a psychological trigger your brain responds to almost automatically, before you've consciously noticed the song at all. Calaris described this using a phrase that's stuck around in the research ever since: cognitive itch. The idea that a piece of music can create a kind of low-grade mental irritation, one your brain tries to resolve the same way you'd resolve a physical itch, by scratching it. Mentally. Which, for a song, means replaying the tune over and over until the irritation supposedly fades. Your brain isn't enjoying the song on some 10th internal replay. It's trying to finish it. That distinction lines up with something psychologists have understood for almost a century, called the Zeigarnik effect, the finding. First documented by Soviet psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik in the 1920s after she noticed waiters remembered unpaid orders far better than orders that had already been settled, that people remember unfinished tasks significantly better than completed ones. An earworm is, very often, a musical phrase looping right before its resolution. The hook, the unresolved note, rarely the ending, and almost never the whole song. Your brain isn't replaying a favorite song. It's replaying an open tab it refuses to let you close. But here's where it gets interesting, because closing that tab turns out to be a lot harder than simply finishing the song inside your head. A common piece of advice is to play the entire song, start to finish, so your brain finally gets the resolution it's been chasing. Some earworm researchers, including Ira Hyman at Western Washington University, have specifically tested this strategy in controlled studies, and the results are mixed. For some people, it genuinely works. The loop ends once the song does. For a meaningful chunk of others, listening to the song again just reloads it, restarting the exact 3 seconds instead of retiring them for good. The fix and the cause can be the identical few seconds of music. Hyman's research pointed to something else that's easy to overlook. Earworms show up most often during low-attention states: driving, showering, folding laundry, walking somewhere familiar. Tasks that occupy your hands and eyes but leave your actual mind mostly idle and unsupervised. Boredom doesn't cause earworms. It just clears away whatever was crowding them out in the first place. But here's where it gets interesting. Because that idle mind theory explains something almost everyone has noticed and never really questioned. Stress makes the whole thing worse, not better, and not by a small margin. A 2015 study published in the journal Psychology of Music found that people with obsessive-compulsive tendencies and people who generally score higher on trait anxiety report both more frequent and more distressing earworms than the general population. For most people, an earworm is a mild, occasionally annoying loop that fades within an hour. For a smaller subset, it can genuinely interfere with concentration and, in some reported cases, with sleep quality itself. Same song. Wildly different experience depending entirely on who's hosting it. Musicians and people who work professionally with music also report earworms more frequently than non-musicians, which surprises most people, since you'd expect deep familiarity with music to build some kind of immunity over time. It doesn't. Familiarity seems to make your brain a more efficient trap for a melody, not a more resistant one. But here's where it gets interesting, because this is roughly where earworm research quietly stops being trivia and starts being something more useful. There's a clinical angle to all of this that most people never hear about. Music therapists and a small number of cognitive researchers have started exploring whether the same cognitive itch mechanism can be triggered on purpose, using a short, catchy, harmless phrase to interrupt intrusive or obsessive thoughts in patients dealing with anxiety or PTSD. The logic is blunt. Fight one unwanted mental loop with a smaller, more manageable one that you actually choose. Early studies on this are limited, small in scale, and far from conclusive. But the direction of the research is genuinely promising to the people running it. The idea itself says something honest about earworms in general. The exact mechanism that annoys you in the shower isn't a glitch. It's a mechanism your brain built on purpose, for a reason that usually has nothing to do with music at all. It just doesn't ask permission before it runs, and it doesn't check whether the timing is convenient for you. There's one more piece of the puzzle that rarely makes it into casual explanations. A small number of people report almost never getting earworms, and researchers have started asking what's different about them. One theory, floated by memory researchers studying auditory imagery, points to differences in how vividly someone can mentally hear music in the first place. People with a condition informally described as low or absent musical imagery, sometimes discussed, alongside the broader concept of anauralia, report that songs simply don't replay involuntarily in their heads, the way they do for most people, because their internal soundtrack is faint or effectively silent to begin with. It's a small, still developing area of research, not a settled diagnosis, but it suggests the earworm isn't a universal glitch in the software. It's a feature of a specific kind of mental architecture, and not everyone is running the same build. For everyone else, the software runs by default, whether you want it to or not. But here's where it gets interesting, because that default setting raises a bigger question than why this song. It raises the question of what the whole mechanism is actually for, which brings up an uncomfortable follow-up question. Researchers still don't have a full answer to if this mechanism exists to help you finish things, to flag unresolved information so your brain doesn't lose track of it. Why does it so often latch onto a jingle instead of something that actually matters in your life? Why not the unfinished email, the unpaid bill, the conversation you left hanging? Nobody's proposed a fully satisfying answer yet. The leading theory is almost anticlimactic in how unglamorous it is. Your brain doesn't rank importance before it starts the loop. It just grabs whatever unresolved pattern is lying around closest to the surface at that exact idle moment. Sometimes that's a genuine unfinished worry sitting in the back of your mind. More often, and far more often than you'd expect, it's a car commercial jingle from 2009 that you never once asked to remember, sung by someone you've never met, for a product you probably didn't buy, so you're back in the shower. Same 3 seconds, same loop, same song you never chose and don't particularly like. Except now you know it isn't random. It's your brain, mid-sentence, refusing to stop until it finds the next word, and grabbing whatever sentence happened to be closest at hand. Some sentences just don't want to end, even the ones you never meant to start.